You know, from the time we're in grade school, we're basically handed this very specific measuring stick for our own worth.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's all about being, like, smart. You know, can you memorize the state capitals or can you solve the algebra equation the fastest?
Yeah, we're totally taught that our ability to think and analyze and just, conquer problems with our brains is the absolute pinnacle of human capability.
Exactly. But what if everything you've been taught about being smart is actually the exact thing holding you back?
I mean, it really challenges the whole foundation of how we navigate our lives. We put the thinking mind on this massive pedestal.
You really do.
We just assume it's the driver of everything meaningful. Like, if we just think hard enough, we can strategize our way out of literally any problem.
Yeah, but when you look closely at how life actually operates, especially in these, like, moments of profound change or crisis, that assumption starts to crack pretty quickly.
It shatters.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We have a really fascinating mission for you today. We are going to completely dismantle and redefine what intelligence actually is.
That's going to be a fun one.
Definitely. Now, to do this, we are pulling from a rather unexpected combination of sources. On one hand, we are looking at the modern, totally empirical explosion of artificial intelligence.
Which is everywhere right now.
Everywhere. And on the other hand, we are putting that right up against a very esoteric, thought-provoking set of documents outlining the teachings of Adamus Saint-Germain.
Quite the contrast, I know.
Yeah, I know mixing a metaphysical text with modern text sounds a bit out there, but bear with us, the overlap is just mind-blowing.
It really is. Because for centuries, humanity equated intelligence with consciousness. We just assumed that because we are self-aware and we can solve complex problems, those two things, awareness and problem solving, were permanently linked.
Like a package deal.
Exactly. We thought, if you could solve a complex puzzle, you must have a soul, or at least a conscious mind. But then suddenly, AI enters the stage.
And changes everything.
Right. We now have these systems that can analyze, learn, create, converse, and solve incredibly complex problems, all without a shred of self-awareness.
I mean, an AI can write a symphony, right? Or diagnose a super disease or pass the bar exam.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sit there feeling proud of itself afterward. It doesn't, worry about its own mortality or wonder if it's doing a good job.
It has absolutely no I am state. It doesn't even know it exists.
Which proves definitively that complex analysis and logic can exist entirely without consciousness.
Which is a huge realization. AI is essentially just pure processing power.
Right.
And this really forces us into a corner conceptually.
Right, because if intelligence is not consciousness, and if it's not simply the act of being self-aware and thinking, then what exactly is it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Well, since AI just broke our traditional measuring stick, we clearly need a new one. And to understand how Adamus redefines intelligence in this text, I want to offer an analogy.
Oh, I love analogies. Let's hear it.
Okay, so I want you to picture the traditional human mind, our logic, our memory, our analytical skills picture. It's like a person frantically rummaging through an old, overflowing metal filing cabinet.
Oh, that is a great visual.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we face a new problem, our human intelligence just digs through the files of the past. It looks for old experiences, old data, old answers, and it tries to force them onto a brand new situation.
It's just recycling.
Exactly. It's like me trying to solve a complex disagreement with my current partner by using the exact same argument I had with a college roommate 10 years ago.
Which never works out well.
Never. It doesn't fit, but it's literally the only file I have in the cabinet.
That filing cabinet analogy perfectly captures the limitation of mental intelligence. It is entirely dependent on the past. You can only pull out what you've already put in.
Yeah, you're limited by your own history.
Exactly. But Adamus introduces a core concept that completely flips that filing cabinet upside down. He states that true intelligence is not a product of the brain at all.
Wait, not at all?
Not at all. It doesn't originate in the mind. To understand what it actually is, we have to look at the relationship between consciousness and energy.
Okay, let's break those two things down, because those words get thrown around a lot in this space. How does this text actually define consciousness versus energy?
Good question. So consciousness is simply awareness. It is the pure recognition of I exist. That's it.
Just I exist.
Right. It possesses no energy of its own. It has no agenda. And it honestly has no need to fix or change anything. It is purely the observer. But then there is energy. And Adamus describes energy as the song of consciousness.
Oh, I like that, song of consciousness.
It's beautiful, right? Energy is the raw medium through which we get to actually experience things. It creates forms, realities, circumstances. our physical bodies. But energy doesn't just splash around randomly like water from a broken pipe.
Right. It has some sort of structure.
Yes. It has to be patterned. It has to be aligned to actually create a reality. And here is the radical redefinition. Intelligence is the innate capacity of energy to organize itself.
Wow. So it's not the brain.
No. Intelligence is the invisible force that takes raw energy and arranges it into a coherent, meaningful experience.
So intelligence is the organizer. It's not the brain thinking thoughts. It's the inherent property of energy arranging itself.
Precisely.
Which really explains a super surprising detail from the sources. The text points out that highly intelligent people, like people with massive mental filing cabinets, the ones who always got straight A's, are often the most stuck in life.
It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it?
It really does.
But it makes sense when you separate mental processing from true intelligence. Highly intellectual people often become completely dependent on that narrow, brain-based form of intelligence.
Right. They rely on the filing cabinet for everything.
Exactly. When faced with a life challenge, they immediately run to the files. They analyze, they compare, they predict, they overthink.
They just spin their wheels.
Yeah, they get trapped in these endless loops of anxiety and doubt because they are trying to solve new, complex human experiences using only old files. They are using the brain to try and organize energy.
Which is a job the brain was never designed to do.
If the brain isn't the sole generator of intelligence, we have to really take a hard look at what mental intelligence actually is. And I know the sources suggest we basically need to dethrone the mind before we can understand the broader field.
Oh, they do. They absolutely do.
Yeah, they do not hold back on their critique of the intellect at all. They describe mental intelligence as the triple L, local, linear, and limited.
The texts make a really compelling case for those three constraints, too. I mean, the mind is local because it's literally trapped within the physical skull, right? It's restricted to interpreting only what the physical senses feed it.
It's just the five senses.
Right. And then it's linear because it can only understand reality through the passage of time. Cause and effect, past and future. It completely fails to grasp the simultaneous nature of reality.
It needs a timeline.
It needs a timeline. And finally, it's limited because it relies almost entirely on memory and logic, leaning heavily on this concept the sources call qualia.
Exactly.
But hold on, if my brain isn't generating the intelligence that runs my life, how am I functioning right now? Where can you and I actually see this happening in our daily lives, tangibly, without using our brains? Let's look at the most intimate, undeniable example you have, your own body.
Okay.
At this exact second, your cells are communicating, tissues are regenerating, your heart is beating, your hormones are regulating. If you get a paper cut, your body immediately coordinates an incredibly complex cascade of biological responses. It sends white blood cells, it forms a clot, it rebuilds tissue. Are you consciously mentally managing any of that?
Oh, definitely not. If I had to consciously remember to heal my skin, I'd probably bleed out from a paper cut while trying to figure out which cells to send where.
Right.
I'd be looking in my filing cabinet like, wait, is it red blood cells or white blood cells that go first?
Exactly. You'd be totally lost. The body possesses its own profound intelligence. It doesn't need conscious mental direction to maintain harmony. In fact, when we try to mentally interfere with our biology like stressing over every little symptom, we often disrupt that natural healing. And the sources mention a really fascinating phenomenon related to this.
Oh, what is it?
During periods of significant life transition, or what some people call a spiritual awakening, people often get incredibly frustrated with their bodies.
No, I've heard this.
Yeah, they feel sudden aches, deep fatigue, or they just become convinced their body's breaking down.
Because the mind just views discomfort as a problem to be solved.
Right. But the text suggests the body isn't broken at all in those moments. It is using its inherent biological intelligence to respond, adjust, and reorganize to new energetic states.
That is wild.
So what the mind perceives as a chaotic breakdown is actually biological intelligence flawlessly at work, basically upgrading the system.
That reframes so much. We view pain or fatigue as a failure rather than a reorganization. And honestly, we see this outside the body.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, look at nature. A forest doesn't hold a board meeting to decide how to balance its ecosystem.
Definitely no spreadsheets involved.
Right. The weather systems, oceans, they don't use logic. They respond through natural energetic alignment. And even in our own human experience, think about genuine creativity.
Oh, that's a great point.
If you talk to artists or musicians or inventors, they almost never say their best ideas came from staring at a blank page and just forcing an answer.
Oh, they usually say the idea just, came to them.
Right. The insight arrived fully formed, out of nowhere, usually when they were taking a shower or walking the dog.
Yeah, when they weren't thinking about it.
Exactly. It bypassed linear reasoning entirely.
And if we pull all these threads together, it really reveals a profound truth that challenges our whole education system. The mind doesn't generate intelligence. It merely participates in it.
It's just along for the ride.
Pretty much. Biological intelligence, nature's intelligence, creative intelligence, they all already know how to maintain harmony and balance. They don't need us to figure them out. And scaling that logic all the way down to the foundational level of reality brings us to particle intelligence.
Yeah. Right. The physics of it.
Yes, because we have been conditioned by classical physics to view matter as these solid, inert, dead building blocks. But the sources, which align pretty well with principles of quantum mechanics here, argue that matter is highly cooperative. Particles aren't isolated objects. They are dynamic relationships in motion. They actively listen and align themselves within the flow of consciousness.
Which perfectly explains the reliance on the observer effect in quantum computing. Like, the superposition of particles, their ability to hold multiple states at once, collapses into a specific alignment based entirely on observation and presence. The matter itself is literally responding to consciousness.
Exactly how quantum computing taps into this phenomena is what makes particle intelligence so tangible. The engineers aren't forcing the particles into rigid states using brute mechanical force.
They're just setting the stage.
Right. They are establishing an environment where the particle's intrinsic responsiveness can be measured. The intelligence is in the atomic cooperation, not just the human engineering.
This all paints a picture of a universe just humming with hidden forms of genius. But there's one specific form of situational intelligence in the sources that, well, it fundamentally changes how we view personal struggles.
Chaos intelligence.
Yes, chaos intelligence.
Yeah.
To the linear mind, when a career suddenly collapses or a long-term relationship ends and your everyday structures just dissolve into disorder, it looks like an absolute catastrophe.
Complete disaster.
Yeah, the mind panics and just assumes failure.
But what's fascinating here is how the sources reframe the mechanics of that disorder. Chaos is not random destruction. It is the highly efficient intelligence of transition.
The intelligence of transition.
Yes. When you outgrow your current life, when your internal awareness expands beyond the rigid structures you've built, those old energetic patterns become a bottleneck. Chaos intelligence is simply the physics of breaking down that rigidity so something truer can emerge.
Which brings us to a massive collision course, I feel like.
How so?
Because if the body and nature can organize themselves flawlessly, what happens when we try to apply that concept to our messy, unpredictable, complicated human lives?
Yeah.
Like our careers, our bank accounts, our relationships, we are so conditioned to interfere and manage those things.
And that interference is where literally all our human suffering comes from.
Yeah. Let's get really practical. Let's say I lose my job, or a 10-year relationship ends, and I am facing total uncertainty about my future.
A highly stressful situation.
Very. My immediate human instinct, and honestly I think the instinct of everyone listening, is to micromanage every single detail of the fallout.
Of course.
I need to update the resume, weigh the pros and cons of moving, control the narrative, network frantically. If I just step back and let this intelligence handle it, won't my life completely fall apart?
It feels like it would.
Right. It feels like taking my hands off the steering wheel on a highway. Like I can't just sit on my couch and expect energy to pay my rent, you know?
And that fear of losing the steering wheel is the exact friction the mind creates, and it's a very human reaction. But letting intelligence work does not mean you become passive.
It doesn't.
Not at all. It doesn't mean you just sit on the couch doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
The teachings clarify the role of the human here, and it's a crucial distinction. Your energy is not waiting for you to give it step-by-step micromanager instructions. It is already organizing circumstances. It's arranging synchronicities, timing, opportunities, experiences. Your role, the role of human consciousness, is simply to choose.
What does that actually look like in the job loss scenario, though? If I'm choosing, but I'm not micromanaging.
Think of it like a restaurant.
Okay.
Consciousness chooses the meal. You say, I choose to navigate this career transition with grace, and I choose a new opportunity that fulfills me and supports me abundantly.
Right.
That's the choice. You place the order.
I place the order.
Right. And the moment you make that clear choice, your intelligence begins organizing the energy in the kitchen to support it.
Oh, wow.
The heavy lifting of how that happens, the exact sequence of events, the specific person you need to bump into at a coffee shop, the timing of an email, that is the job of intelligence.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, but it leads to the obvious next question.
Which is?
If my job is just to choose the experience and then allow my energy to organize the how do I actually stop overthinking? Because my brain is still going to be screaming at me to fix everything. How do I literally step out of the kitchen?
The sources offer a very elegant solution to this exact problem. The bridge between your awareness and this deeper intelligence is curiosity.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
Feels much lighter than the heavy burden of, figuring it out.
It is entirely different energetically. The text draws this really sharp contrast between thinking and curiosity. When we are thinking, we are seeking conclusions. We want certainty. But ironically, demanding certainty actually closes off possibilities. It forces energy into a very narrow, rigid box. Curiosity, on the other hand, doesn't demand a rigid answer. It seeks experience.
It keeps you open.
Yes. It says, I wonder what will happen next, instead of, I must control what happens next.
It's the difference between saying, I have to get this specific job at this specific company or my life is ruined, versus, I wonder what amazing opportunity is going to come out of this transition.
Spot on. And in that state of open wonder, intelligence actually has the space to reorganize reality. You aren't boxing it in with your expectations.
That is so freeing.
Furthermore, when you bring curiosity to your life, you also begin to access expanded forms of perception, like sensory intelligence and emotional intelligence.
Ooh, I want to pause on emotional intelligence because, honestly, when I'm experiencing a massive spike of anxiety or grief or anger, it feels like the exact opposite of organization. It feels like total chaos. How is an anxiety attack organizing my energy?
It feels like chaos because the mind is trying to repress it. But emotions provide information that logic simply cannot reach. Think of an intense emotion not as a flaw, but as a messenger. That anxiety or that anger is revealing unresolved energies. It's bringing hidden desires or deep transformations that are occurring beneath the surface up to your awareness.
So the emotion itself is an attempt by my energy to reorient me.
Precisely. When you approach your own emotions with curiosity, saying, I wonder why this anxiety is here right now, instead of judging it or trying to control it, you aren't just acquiring more data for your mental filing cabinet.
Right. You're not just analyzing it.
No, you are allowing the intelligence within that emotion to process. You begin to see how your feelings are actually orienting your experience, pointing you toward what needs to be released or acknowledged.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is.
It means nothing is actually going wrong, even when it feels super intense. It's not about acquiring more information or better coping strategies. It's about expanding your perception so you can notice the intelligence that's already running the show.
Perfectly said. And beyond emotional intelligence, the texts also highlight sensory intelligence.
Sensory, like our five senses.
Right. We generally assume that what we see, hear, and touch with our physical senses is the absolute entirety of reality. But Adamusa suggests that as your perception expands beyond those limited physical senses, your intelligence naturally expands.
So it's not about learning more facts.
No, you don't need to cram more facts into your brain. You just need to access more of the reality that already exists around you. The broader your awareness, the richer and more organized your experience becomes.
Yeah.
And this brings us to another crucial distinction made in the teachings, the fundamental difference between intelligence and wisdom.
Right, because we established that intelligence is the mechanism that organizes information and energy. So what does wisdom do?
Wisdom is described as the domain of the soul. While intelligence organizes the experience, wisdom transforms it.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It really is. Intelligence might identify patterns, but wisdom understands meaning. The soul isn't interested in accumulating data or passing math tests. It takes the accumulated richness, the joy, and even the pain of an experience and transforms it into deep realization. Intelligence executes the event. Wisdom distills the purpose of the event.
And, as we map all this out, the biology, the intelligence, the curiosity, I'm actually having a bit of an aha moment about the source material.
Oh. What's that?
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about intelligence, redefining it, exploring how it organizes energy, figuring out how to access it. But looking closely at Adamusa's teachings, that entire framing is a bit of a bait and switch, isn't it?
Ultimately, this isn't actually a discussion about intelligence at all.
When you peel back all the layers, the biological healing, the intelligence arranging the circumstances, the shift into curiosity, the entire teaching really boils down to a single, very challenging word: trust.
Trust.
Yes. Think about the human condition for a moment. For centuries, our survival as a species has been entirely based on control.
Yeah, surviving the elements?
Right. We believed, often rightfully so, that we had to control our thoughts, control our emotions, control the environment, control the weather, control the people around us. If we didn't control the outcome, we wouldn't survive the winter.
We'd literally die.
Exactly. But the shift into true mastery is not about becoming smarter so you can be a better controller. It is about confronting the ultimate human question. Can you stop trying to force what intelligence is already arranging?
Wow. Can you actually trust the energy that is serving you? Which is terrifying for the human mind. The mind literally feels like it's being fired from its job as the CEO of your life.
Oh, the mind hates it.
But on the other side of that terror, it sounds like total freedom. It means you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your head anymore.
It is the ultimate release of burdens. The intelligence is already there. The organization of your life, the healing of your body, the arrangement of your next steps, it is already occurring.
It's just happening.
Yeah, the energy is naturally responding to your consciousness. The journey isn't to build a better brain or a bigger filing cabinet. The journey is to recognize that you are supported by an inherent wisdom and to simply have the courage to allow it to work.
Wow. Okay, let's bring this all together for you listening right now. We started this deep dive looking at intelligence as this tightly wound, brain-bound calculator. But looking through the lens of these sources, we've completely shattered that definition.
We really have.
Intelligence isn't what your mind creates. It is the natural underlying capacity of energy to intuitively organize itself. It is your body healing the paper cut. It is the forest balancing its ecosystem. It is the intelligence waiting for you to simply choose an experience and let it flow.
And the key to unlocking it is recognizing when you're using an old map to navigate new territory, letting go of the mental micromanagement and leaning heavily into open curiosity.
Exactly.
So the provocative thought I want to leave you with is this. What if the deepest wisdom in your life isn't something you possess inside your head, but something you participate in every single time you truly, openly connect with the world around you?
Man, that is powerful. So maybe the next time you feel stuck or panicked or just overwhelmed by a decision, instead of running back to that old frantic filing cabinet in your mind, you could just pause, step back, get curious, and see what kind of intelligence is waiting to organize the world right in front of you.
Until next time, dive deep and dive often.